So much for joining us here tonight, and please join me in welcoming our first speaker of the evening, Sarah Thompson.
Okay, thank you, Kristen, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. As Kristen explained, this event was inspired by two things happening at the MFA at the same time. The publication of the book on tattoos in Japanese prints, and then our exhibition, Showdown, Kuniyoshi versus Kunisada. Two artists who both sometimes included tattoos in their print designs, particularly Kuniyoshi, who's often credited with being the person who really popularized large-scale tattoos in Japan beginning in the late 1820s. So here are two examples of prints that are in the show, showing the special strengths and skills of the two artists. The reason their names are so similar is that they were both fellow pupils of an older artist, Utagawa Toyokuni. All of these names are art names. It's not their real legal names, but the master Toyokuni gave his star pupils names that were based on part of his own name. So since he was Toyokuni, these two pupils became Kunisada and Kuniyoshi. And there were actually a lot more artists named Utagawa Kuni something or other, but these are the two who became really famous. Kunisada was the older one by 11 years. He is the all-time best-selling designer of ukiyo-e woodblock prints. And Kuniyoshi was no slouch either. The Kunisada is thought to have designed somewhere between 20,000 and 35,000 prints in his lifetime, and Kuniyoshi is thought to have designed about 10,000. The reason they could do these huge figures is that the artists themselves did not physically produce the prints. They just did the designs. Other people carved the wooden blocks and did the printing. There's one block for each color. The first print run of these things would have been about 1,000. If that sold, they'd print another 1,000 and so on. And you could get maybe as many as 6,000 or so before the print run ran out. However, they were cheap, they were disposable, they were not considered fine art. One print was about the price of a big bowl of noodles, which was a standard cheap meal. So think burger and fries. Or as a friend of mine once put it, if you could afford to skip lunch, you could afford to buy a print. So people would get them, stick them on the wall, throw them away when they got tired of them. Fortunately for us, there were people who liked them, even though they weren't considered real art, and who did save them, so we still have some remaining today. And you can enjoy them in the exhibition. Now, the specialty of Kunisada was kabuki actors. He was very, very good at drawing the likenesses and drawing these superstars so that their fans could recognize them. So when Kuniyoshi came along, he was younger. Also, it took him longer to get established. So for a long time, when he was a young artist, he was really just another one of those many ambitious young Utagawa students. Finally, in 1827, he had a huge hit. This was a best-selling print series. It made him a star, and it added a new kind of subject matter to the repertoire of printmaking. So the most popular subjects were kabuki actors and beautiful women. But there were other things that were done all along. There were some landscapes, there were some pictures of flowers and birds, there were some historical prints showing the great warriors of the past, but those were all very minor until Kuniyoshi designed this great hit series that you see at the top left there, and that not only made him a star, but made the so-called warrior prints extremely popular. Now, the series was called 108 Heroes of the Suikoden. That's the Japanese pronunciation. And the interesting thing is they're actually not Japanese heroes, but Chinese martial artists. A very famous Chinese martial arts novel was translated into Japanese. And then Kuniyoshi's color prints were based on it. I always think of this as being like the big boom in Chinese martial arts movies starting in the 1970s. So something similar happened in Japan in the 1820s, but with books and woodblock prints. So there is the tattooed hero. You're seeing him from behind. He has just won a wrestling contest, and that's why all that he's wearing is the decorated belt of the champion wrestler. But then they realize that he's one of those outlaws who live in the marsh, and so he has to escape over the rooftops, and he pulls off the, I don't think I have a laser pointer. He pulls off the monster head that was on the end of the ridgepole and throws it at the guys chasing him. But this gives you a beautiful view of his muscular back, which is all covered with tattoos. Now, these 108, thank you, martial arts heroes in the book, actually, the book itself says of 5 of them that they had tattoos, but Kuniyoshi, who is said to have had tattoos himself, liked them so much he drew tattoos on 15 of them. And these are not just small tattoos, but these are the famous Japanese bodysuit type tattoos. It's almost like a garment all across the back and across the chest, sometimes with a blank strip down the front, and then down to the elbows and down to the knees. So really looks like a garment. Very spectacular. This was a new fashion in Japan at the time. How it started is a little mysterious. Some people think that actually Kuniyoshi started it, but there is evidence that it was already happening even before he brought out this series. So my theory is that it was already going on, but that he raised it to a new level of artistry. And he made it something that really lasted and not just kind of a temporary fad. So, in fact, not only were Kuniyoshi's prints a hit at the time, they are still being used today. That is that same print. And then I'm afraid I can't tell you who did the work on the left because I just pulled it off the web a while ago, and when I went and looked for it again, I couldn't find it. But you can clearly see here is the drawing based on the print, and then there is the half-completed tattoo. So they still are in use today. So not only were people inspired to get tattoos that looked like what Kuniyoshi designed for the heroes in the prints, but then also you get tattoos of these prints and tattoos within tattoos. Now, the question people always ask me is, so do you have tattoos yourself? And the embarrassing answer is no, because I'm a wimp and I'm afraid of needles. I don't even have pierced ears. I wear clip earrings that tend to fall off. However, I'm happy to say there were real tattoos that were involved in the beginning of this project and that kind of inspired the research that led to the tattoo book. And those tattoos were on this nice young man who you see looking very, very proper here. This is my former assistant, Abraham Schroeder. He worked with me on that huge print documentation project for 5 years. And this is Abraham's left shoulder blade. So I never saw the tattoos in life. It is very improper to ask your assistant to take their clothes off, even if you just want to see the tattoo. He designed it based on works that he found here at the MFA. This is one of our Japanese prints. It's a small print done in shades of blue with wonderful bats. And then the small bats, this is a painting. It is actually by the artist Kunisada, and I wish we could have included it in the show as an example of Kunisada's painting, but it needs conservation work. So maybe in the future we'll be able to exhibit this very nice painting of a young woman on a summer evening with bats in the sky that Abraham used in his design. He is now living in California with his family and is designing children's picture books, such as The Gentleman Bat, which I recommend very strongly. Now, he and I worked together on a huge project here at the MFA. We have the biggest collection of Japanese prints outside Japan. We have over 50,000 sheets. But when I came here in 2004, we didn't know how many we had. They had never been counted because there were so many of them. But we carefully documented everything, photographed it, published it on the web. You can find the entire collection on the MFA website. And it was this huge Japanese Print Access and Documentation Project, or Japanese Print Project for short. Here are just some shots of people working on it. We had a whole team of volunteers who helped us to number the prints, count them, put them in order for the photographers. They were either photographed or in some cases scanned. And we had visiting scholars from Japan who helped us with the cataloging. This is our good friend Masai Kurahashi, and she is a hero of print cataloging because she single-handedly cataloged our Kunisada collection. He is the most heavily represented artist in our collection. I told you he was the all-time bestseller. Out of our 50,000 Japanese prints, 10,000 of them are by him. And this heroic woman cataloged them all. So there she is with some of the things that are in the show. Now, the tattoo project started in the middle of all this. Abraham got his tattoos, and he and I were chatting about it, and said, you know, there are lots of prints that we're seeing as we go through this collection, and many of them show people with tattoos. I wonder if we have enough to do a show. So, as we went through the collection and cataloged and photographed everything, we made a note of it whenever we found a print that had a tattoo in it, and at the end, we had 300 of them. Now, not all of the 300 are really beautiful and interesting, but quite a lot of them are. So that's enough to do several shows, much less just one show. So we had a small exhibit here from 2010 to 2011, which we called Under the Skin, Tattoos in Japanese Prints, and an expanded version of that is the tattoo book that we've just published. This was a small in-house show, no catalog at the time, but we have that now. We started in the 1790s. There were just, people were doing just little tattoos, the name of your sweetheart, which is what's going on here, and both men and women would sometimes get the tattoo of a tattoo of the name of the beloved. Occasionally there would be religious tattoos, the name of the deity that you are devoted to, and so on. But then in the 1820s or so, the fad for the great big tattoos started. This is a photograph. It's an old hand-colored photo from probably the 1850s, so you can't see too clearly what the actual tattoo looks like, but you get the idea. The people who had them at that time were fashionable young men in the cities, typically people who did things that involved physical labor, very active kinds of jobs, construction workers, firefighters, and so on, especially jobs that in the sticky hot summer in Japan might mean taking off as much of your clothing as you could get away with, and really stripping down to the minimum, as this person has done. He is an express courier. This is the kind of person who would go whizzing around on a bicycle today, but in those days they ran along the streets, so he is prepared to run through the streets carrying someone's important message, and rather than hold it in the hand or have it next to the body where it would get sweaty, you carry it on a pole. So that's what's going on there. So this started back in the 1820s or so. And then Kuniyoshi had his huge hit series. On the left, that's another one of the prints from that series of Chinese martial artists. The book is known in English as The Water Margin because the heroic bandits lived in a marsh, and water margin is actually an English term for the marsh around a lake. This is actually my personal favorite. This one is not in the show because we couldn't put everything in, but the Chinese series was such a hit that he then did a series of Japanese heroes. the print on the right is in the exhibition. That is one of the Japanese heroes, and he happily put tattoos on many of them, even when it was not appropriate in historical terms. This is a guy from the 16th century, and they were not doing that type of tattoo then, but who cares? It looks great. This is the triptych that I showed at the beginning. It was done by Kunisada's student, who was known as Kunichika. Again, it's 3 kabuki actors in an imaginary scene. Actors did not usually get real tattoos because they had to play different kinds of roles, but when they played tattooed heroes on stage, they would wear painted bodysuits, and there are actually many roles that call for heroes with tattoos. So here's an imaginary scene of your favorite handsome actors with tattoos, and one thing I really like about these prints is they draw on all the riches of Japanese culture, all kinds of stories. On the right, there are lions and peonies, which are a symbol of bravery. In the middle is a story about the heroic diving woman who steals back the magic pearl that was stolen by the dragons. So the dragons take it, she goes to their underwater palace and gets it back. They pursue her, she dies, but the jewel goes to her friends. So very exciting story with female hero, yes. And then this is another traditional story on the left, and here you see what looks like. Okay, I'm having trouble with the pointer. All right, on the actor's shoulder, you see what looks like a kind of cloak made out of feathers. And it is that garment that is hanging in the tree in the picture above, the story about the heavenly dancer who takes off her feather robe. A young fisherman finds it and hides it and tells her he'll give it back if she dances for him. So she does, and he gives it back, and he gets to see the magic dance. Anyway, there's lots of very interesting stuff in terms of the subject matter of the tattoos. In the early 1870s, when Japan embarked on its big modernization program, the government, during the Meiji era, decided to make tattooing illegal, at least for Japanese citizens. And that was because they thought it was something embarrassingly old-fashioned. It's barbaric to get tattoos. Modern civilized people should not do it. So it was made illegal. But there turned out to be a catch, which was that the foreigners who were visiting Japan in large numbers beginning at this time really liked tattoos. And foreign visitors often wanted to get a tattoo as a souvenir of Japan. So even though it was now illegal for Japanese, the tattoo shops in places like Yokohama were allowed to stay open provided they only tattooed foreigners. This was very fashionable, and a number of wealthy Bostonians went to Japan. There's an excellent book which I recommend. It's called Longfellow's Tattoos, which is about people like the wealthy Bostonians going to Japan and getting tattoos. The Longfellow is not the poet, but his young son. This is Dr. Charles Weld, who died in 1911. And you see him on the left looking like a typical distinguished Boston gentleman. And here is this photo, which is said to be Dr. Weld from behind in the sauna. And you'll notice he has a Japanese dragon all over his back. And he was not the only one of these distinguished gentlemen who had a Japanese tattoo. So in Japan, tattoos have been legal once again since the early 1950s. However, because of that long period when they were not legal, they became associated with organized crime. Because during that time, law-abiding people stopped doing it, but people who were involved with organized crime continued to do it, continued the tattooing tradition, in the underworld, and so even though for more than 60 years it's now been legal again and perfectly acceptable as far as the law is concerned, it still is not really acceptable socially even today. And with just a little bit of looking around on the web, I found things like these signs. These are from Japanese public baths and hot spring spas. They don't want people with tattoos to come, and the reason for that is, frankly, it would scare away the other customers. People would, if they saw someone with a tattoo, especially a big tattoo, they would think, oh no, the mob is here, maybe I should go somewhere else. There's a lot of discussion about this because, of course, especially with the Olympics coming to Japan in 2020, there are going to be lots of people from foreign countries who have tattoos and see nothing wrong with it. And so we don't exactly know what's going to happen. So stay tuned for news about tattoos in Japan. Relating this to my fellow speakers tonight, here is a wonderful example of Chad's work on the left, and this is a Japanese Buddhist guardian deity. He's known as Fudo, the immovable one. If you go to our beautiful Japanese temple room on the second floor, you will see this 12th century wooden statue of Fudo. Actually, the photograph shows him without his halo, but because he is a fierce guardian deity, his halo is not just golden light, but it is flames. So you can see him with his flaming halo. He has fangs that point in opposite directions, one up, one down. He carries a sword because he is a protector, and in his other hand, he typically carries a rope. So he looks very fierce, but he's a good guy. He's on your side. There's a long tradition in Asia of these fierce-looking beings, but who are actually protectors. And we have actually another show about some other beings of that kind called demons and demon quellers. Interestingly enough, he turns up in prints because among the many people who worshipped Fudo in Japan, and indeed still do, the Ichikawa family of kabuki actors, who were the top actors during the Edo period, worshipped Fudo, and they even played him on stage. In fact, the kind of reenactment of Fudo's appearance was one of their specialties when they made a list of 18 great kabuki plays or great scenes in kabuki plays. One of them was Fudo. So here are the kabuki actors playing Fudo and his two attendants sitting on a rock, which symbolizes that he is immovable. And there's a close-up. I'm amazed by the makeup job. They even got the fangs pointing in opposite directions, although I think it would have been difficult to talk with that arrangement. And I found this scene from a play. Like the previous print, this is also by Kunisada, who specialized in kabuki actors. It's not in our show, although it easily could have been, but with 10,000 to choose from, it was hard. Something had to go, and this did not make it into the show. But I found out in this kabuki play, the young hero here has been shipwrecked and is in danger of drowning, and he is saved by Fudo, who lowers that rope to save him. And here you'll note Fudo has a differently colored skin, but it's always something non-human. It's bright red or bright yellow or bright blue. But the interesting thing is apparently in this kabuki production, it was a sort of quick change trick, and the same actor played both Fudo and the man that he's rescuing. So I can't quite imagine how they did that, but apparently it was a very successful production. Here is someone who you will get a better look at in a minute. This is a portrait of Chad. I pulled it off of his website. And there are some artists today in Japan who do works in this style, although as generally as watercolor paintings. So I was very tickled by that one. And you can see now it's very much in the style of the prints we've looked at. And here is another artist, Masami Teraoka, who lives in Hawaii. This is something he did back in 1975, and when I was a young graduate student at Columbia in New York, actually saw an exhibition of his work at the Whitney Museum, and I liked it so much that I bought a poster of this, which has been on my wall ever since. So I've always identified with the tattooed woman, so I guess you could say I have imaginary tattoos, but not real ones. Now, finding things in our collection that relate to Kenji's work was harder, but here is a Hiroshige print illustrating the Japanese tradition of beautifully painted shop signs. You'll notice that this one for a fabric store has its own little roof protecting it from the weather, and there's some other simpler signs here. And we even own a Japanese shop sign from the 1910s, beautifully gilded, and in that kind of hybrid style of the time, with kind of an advertisement for some sort of medicine with the vaguely Western-looking lady and her baby, and it was the signboard of a pharmacy. So Kenji will tell you about his own work, but I was just blown away by some of the things that I found online. I haven't seen it in real life yet, but look forward to that. And he does this with stencil. And of course, if you shift the stencil a little bit, then you can get this wonderful kind of multiple exposure vibration effect, which I like very much. And here are a couple more examples of his work that I found online and that he'll be telling us about himself in a few minutes. I found it very interesting that he works with the stencil technique because there's a long tradition of stencils in various forms of art in Japan. Here at the MFA, we have a large collection of thousands of Japanese textile stencils. These were used for creating kimono patterns. And in fact, it's one of the things that we're working with the Uniqlo people on. So apparently you will soon be seeing some Uniqlo designs that are inspired by the stencil, the textile pattern stencils in this collection. And it's also done by modern Japanese artists. This is a 20th century work. Actually, this will be going up on our walls in February. And it's a scene of a great naval battle from the 12th century, but that is done by a stencil technique. It's very large, it's two pieces about like that, and done by stencil technique. So one of these days, maybe we'll have an exhibition of Japanese works that use different kinds of stencil technique. Okay, I think at this point, we'll all get together and talk to each other and see what other interesting things come up. Yeah. Yes, okay, good. We are on. Okay, well, Chad and Kenji. I guess I start as the interviewer, but you're really welcome to interview me too if you want to. And basically, I think we can just talk. But I guess I'll start with Chad. I looked at your website and looked at some of your things, and I'm really impressed with the range of sources that you've obviously been inspired by. But naturally, since I'm a Japanese print specialist, what I'm most interested in is that area. So I wonder if you could tell us something about how you first encountered Japanese art, especially prints, and how you think it's influenced you.
Well, when I was a little kid, my parents would drop me off at the library a lot as a babysitter.
Wait, Mike, yeah, you have to, pretend you're going to lick it.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right.
Lollipop.
Hey, maybe it was better the other way. I don't know. Yeah, when I was a little kid, my parents would take me to the library as the babysitter, and I would spend a lot of time there, looking at, just kind of planning myself in the art section. I looked a lot at, Japanese art books, print books. We didn't have a wide variety of artists there. It was a pretty small town in Michigan. And I look at those. I looked at a lot of surrealist and abstract artists as well. And I think just somehow when tattooing came into my life and everything, it all kind of blended together somehow.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I guess one thing about the woodblock prints is even aside from the fact that they're connected with tattooing in Japan, just the way that they're done maybe kind of lends itself to that kind of design, because with the woodblock prints there typically is the outline and the color.
Right. Yeah, very much so. I think, Western traditional style tattooing kind of, the way that the images are designed and everything kind of owes its roots to that, woodblock prints, and, in particular, maybe the way that the Japanese tattooers interpreted the prints themselves, and then the Westerners picked it up from the tattooers that way, as the traveling and whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting the way these influences go back and forth and
for sure.
Kind of build on each other. So tell us about your 50 States book and project.
Oh, well, okay. Last year I just kind of had a lot of time on my hands, and I really wanted to see if I could tattoo in all the states in a row, and I just did a trip over, I guess it was supposed to be 96 days, and just tattooing one day in each shop and driving in between. I ended up having an emergency surgery and almost dying along the way.
Oh my God.
Had kidney stones that caused complete kidney failure. So that kind of put a bump in the road, but
it makes it very memorable.
Yeah, a little bit. It kind of made the trip cooler in a way, I guess. But basically, I had a surgery, recovered for a couple days, and went back on the road because I didn't really have anywhere else to go. I wasn't living anywhere at the time, so did that, and then had to fly back a couple times during the course of the trip for follow-up surgeries. And so in the end, it took about 120 days, and it was the best thing I've ever done. So. Super fun.
Well, yeah, to finish the project with that kind of adversity is really impressive.
You have to finish. You can't let things stop you if you have a goal in your mind.
Yeah. What is there any kind of symbolism of the gorilla and the map?
Just yeah. I mean, I guess so. Just trying to eat it all, man. Just go for it. Just destroy it.
Go for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Do the whole thing.
Yeah. Nothing's gonna stop you.
Yeah. All right. And what else? Do you have more images of?
Yeah, I guess there's some. We have some tattoo images here.
Ooh.
Here's like Oni I did.
Did you see when you were looking around the Demons and Demon Photos show?
Yeah. Oh,
We've got
stuff,
some Oni on the walls at the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
This one, I did it at a shop in Hong Kong. I did the lightning bolt in his hand, kind of using some Samoan kind of pattern work, just to kind of intermix some cultural things, and just thought it looked cool. Let's see. Here's Hanya I did.
Yep.
Kind of also, just not really in the Japanese way, just kind of.
But it's very recognized.
Yeah, for sure.
And
There's
there
the
he
photo.
is. Yeah.
Just kind of illustrating the bold lines, heavy shading.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's your map-eating gorilla.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't really know where this one came from.
Or deep in the subconscious.
I'll be honest, I drew it for the trip, and
Yeah.
I thought, man, nobody's gonna get this, and I ended up doing it a lot. It became kind of popular. It shocked me. So.
Yeah.
And just some more examples of just black shading and color and. This, is obviously from looking at a lot of surreal stuff when I was a kid. I think it just.
Right.
And also being interested in the Japanese stuff is also it was like a gateway to the rest of Asia as far as imagery and things like that. So I try to put that kind of stuff in my work when I can and when the clients are interested in it.
How much input comes from the client and how much from you? How do you and they decide what it's going to be?
Well, I'm lucky. A lot of times my clients seem to have really good ideas, and you know, they come to me with that, and I just kind of run with it. And most of the time, I'm really fortunate that they're open-minded enough to let me kind of do whatever. But a lot of times it is based on their idea. You know, I don't try and force my stuff on people if I can avoid it.
Well, presumably they come to you in the first place because they like what they've seen of your work.
Hope so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Over to Kenji's images. I'm really fascinated by the wide range of things that you do. Especially you started out in electrical engineering, and then went to sign painting, and then do your own painting also. So tell us how that happened.
So I studied engineering, mechanical engineering in Tokyo, 1980, to 2002. Then when I was in engineering, when I was studying engineering, I got really into motorcycle culture and also hot rod. When I was growing up, actually, I was always fascinated about American culture, but getting into motorcycle culture, I think that was a beginning of my journey to sign painting.
I would never have guessed that between engineering and sign painting was motorcycles.
Yeah, but it's actually all sort of connected, because I do lots of lettering as a job, and I think there's lots of engineering mind required to understand letter forms, and also understanding the tools, which the brush, and so respect the, basically it requires understanding of tools that I use, and also the letter forms, and it's very mechanical.
Yeah, can you tell us more about the tools? Because I never really thought about how it's done.
For the sign making.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So for most of the signs, sign painters make, we use a pattern which is kind of extensive. We call it pounce pattern, which is a piece of paper with outline of artwork perforated and bring to job site, or and put up position it, and have there's a pounce bag. It's a bag filled with charcoal or chalk, a chalk powder. So you pounce over the pattern and transfer whatever the artwork onto the surface, and then trace with brush, basically trace with brush. But the tools I was talking about was more so I think the letters came out from invention of the tools. So to understand letters, traditional letters, you have to understand the tools. So that when you look at the Roman Trajan column, that was actually like the carved Roman letters were actually like painted with flat brush first, and then carved after. So back then already there was a master of like a brush master who can like actually write perfect Roman letters. And then without understanding the tools, I think it's impossible to write like perfect letters.
Right, yes, okay. Well, now it's starting to make more sense to me, because one thing that puzzled me when I looked at your work at first was what is the connection between the sign painting and then your own paintings that you do using the stencil technique. But I'm getting a little more idea, but please tell us more.
Yeah, there's like at least 3 like common things between overlapping part with my stencil work painting and sign painting.
What else do you have?
Actually, this is actually my installation from Museum of San Francisco.
Okay, so you
Museum
said-
of
yeah.
Design and Crafts.
Okay, so you do installation type art using some of those letter shapes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually, I make signs for, sorry, I kind of like derailed.
Yeah.
But this is like my personal work. I usually, for my job, I make signs for restaurants and all sorts of business. But this one is more like using letter as a visual element instead of things to read. So legibility or readability is a little not prioritized. It's
Right.
more like I think I want to present the way I used to see the alphabet when I was growing up. I couldn't read, so
Yes. Yeah.
things
yeah,
were
yeah.
like I used to see signs and even like English writing, more like shapes and
Yes.
like
right.
icons.
Abstract designs.
Yeah, also like
yeah.
colors, and so this is like this is basically I was presenting the way I used to see street signs and like newspaper, and then I think that lots of Japanese people still see things like that.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. Interesting.
this is the Japanese traditional Japanese sign painters. Last year, I went to Japan and then visited sign shop in Osaka, Japan. And they were one of the last sign painters, traditional sign painters alive in Japan.
Well, are they using any kind of guide when they do the lettering? I can't see anything, but are there maybe pencil lines or pouncing or something?
They do. They draw top and bottom line, and then after that they just like write almost perfect letters.
Right.
So the Latin alphabet and Japanese characters are very different. Latin alphabet has all different shapes, like a triangle shape to a square shape, circle shape. And Japanese characters fit in a square format.
Yeah.
So the letter spacing is different.
Right. Yeah.
But there's common thing about Japanese character and Latin alphabet is it's all about black and white balance.
Yes. Yeah.
So it looks like this character. It looks like all like a same stroke weight, but it's actually this like sign paint use. This is slightly thinner than this like vertical stroke.
Yeah.
To keep this white space. But this is something that I think we can explain in words, like it's just from muscle memory and then years of training.
Yeah, yeah. And please, yes. Okay, can we quickly finish what you were going to show? We're almost at the end, and then we'll do questions.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry I asked too many questions.
Another experimental work with brush stroke. I did this type of work, 49 painting of this type of brush stroke abstract painting.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. And this is some like installation image.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, very nice. All right. I'm sorry, everybody. We got interested in talking to each other, but we need now to talk to you and find out what you want to ask about. So let's have questions.
This question is for Chad. If you could talk a little bit about, I know you sort of mentioned like the back and forth influence between like American traditional tattooing and Japanese tattooing, but if you could talk a little bit about like what other world tattooing traditions have influenced Japanese tattooing, like the layout of the backs. I'd be really interested to hear about that. Thank you.
So you're saying like if another world tradition influenced the way that the Japanese traditional tattoo came about?
Like were Polynesian tattoos influencing Japanese tattoos? I'm just curious if there was any sort of other.
Honestly, not that I know of.
Can I scoot
yeah,
up?
maybe Sarah might even be better for that one than
at
me.
At the time when the big tattoos developed in Japan, Japan was almost completely cut off from the outside world. That was the policy of the Japanese government from the 1630s to the 1850s, was that there was really minimal contact. Japanese were absolutely not allowed to travel at all, and only a few foreign traders were allowed to come to Japan. Basically China, Korea, the Netherlands, and that was it. So there really wasn't the opportunity, as far as we know, the Japanese tattooing tradition at that time was pretty much developed in isolation.
Well, also there was for several thousand years, as far as my memory allows me to recollect, there was decorative tattooing also going on in Japan among its native population, that as time went on, developed into what it became.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know about the history of tattooing in Japan because it's kind of a topic that people are afraid of because of the organized crime connection. So, eventually we'll find out lots of interesting things. But what about now? What about now? Influences back and forth now.
Well, I mean, it's like a big give and take, I guess. The traditional tattoo in Japan is still the traditional way, but there's a lot of contemporary Japanese tattooers that are doing all styles, and I think the tattoo world kind of takes and gives to each other worldwide. Kind of, it's that kind of a thing. It's just a thing where you kind of take from wherever you can to make things look cool or to satisfy your clients or whatever it may be.
Sarah, I have one all the way back.
Hey, I got a question for Chad. I guess it's for anybody. I was reading recently that tattooing was outlawed basically in Japan and only relegated to people who had were medical doctors, and it was no longer legal for people to tattoo in shops. This was in a CNN article maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I was wondering, A, why do you think that they would do that? And B, how do you think that that would change the tattoo culture that's currently in Japan? And do you think there'll be any loss of traditional Japanese tattooing knowledge?
No, I mean, look, I think the law doesn't matter. To put it bluntly, like, I think people are going to do what they want. I think that, in some ways, maybe it becoming sort of illegal in that way. I mean, it hasn't completely passed. From what I was talking to a friend of mine in Japan about it, and he said that it's like a preliminary change. A lot of it is because of some sort of, idea that, people don't want, the Japanese government or whatever doesn't want people coming for the Olympics or whatever to think that it's some sort of barbaric thing or whatever. It's a weird, misguided worldview. But anyway, I think in the end, something going underground is going to give it a lot more vitality, and it's going to give it make it a lot more interesting. I mean, if it became illegal everywhere, who cares? People are still going to get it. People are still going to do it. And I think it's going to be a more interesting thing anyway, so.
Hi, I'm a student of tattoo. I'm a tattoo artist. When Admiral Perry showed up in Japan and they opened the doors to Western commercialization, the emperor banned tattooing. At the height of the golden age of the ukiyo-e, the floating world, and it backfired terribly. It created, in some ways, the Western desire to be tattooed in Japan and to get Japanese tattoos. So it's funny that this is happening now to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Little did we know when we planned this event that Japanese tattooing would be in the news just at this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange when you're traveling in Japan, and also I've seen it in Korea as well, where there's signs like she showed you where you're just kind of not welcome in certain places, and I don't know. I don't know if that's bad or good, or depends on your viewpoint, I guess.
And there is, I will say, there is often a question of whether the sign is going to be enforced or not. So, yeah.
I mean, hey, I was kicked out of the gym at a hotel once because I had tattoos. They're like, you can't be here. And I was like, well, give me a discount. That was actually in Seoul. That wasn't in Japan.
Hi. I was curious if there was much evidence about grief or mourning tattoos in traditional tattooing culture, and whether that would have made it more socially acceptable.
Do you know anything about these?
I'll be honest, I'm ignorant to that subject.
Yeah. I'm not really aware of anything like that in the older 19th century material. I think it is sometimes a motive for people in Japan today who are not associated with organized crime, but who get the tattoos. There was an excellent show on exhibition on tattoos worldwide that I saw in Toronto, and it has traveled and is it San Francisco? It's been around to some different cities. Anyway, I saw it in Toronto, but there was an.
Is that the one that started in Paris?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in
that's
LA
the
right
one.
now. Yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
was-
Okay. I couldn't remember. But among other things, they had a video interview with a Japanese woman who had gotten a massive tattoo as an act of mourning. But that was something very private for her. I don't think it's, as far as I know, it's not a really established practice, but it certainly might be a motive for an individual.
I mean, it happens a lot in the West too. I mean, you know, when I used to work in the street shop, half the tattoos you did were some memorial for somebody that died. You know.
Hi, this is for Kenji and Chad. But as artists, how do you balance your own creativity, like satisfying your own creativity, while also satisfying the customer or the client's wants and needs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I try not to my goal is in sign painting. I try not to put my personality. I try not to put myself into work. So that's what I'm aiming for. And then in my own work, I'm more like the study piece. So I've been doing experimental work, but it's more to give better understanding of lettering and all sorts of things that I need for work. So I think of creativity is, I think even if it's not my personal work, I use different creativity, and I don't think that creativity doesn't need to be self-expression. Can be some more a problem solving or something else.
I agree with what he said. I mean, I myself have been really fortunate that a lot of the people that come to me want whatever it is they perceive that I do. But generally, I'm kind of happiest in tattooing, doing what people want and just trying to, do it in the way that I'm comfortable doing it. It's not necessarily that I'm trying to express myself. It's more that, I'm just trying to do it in a way that I'm not going to mess it up, and or at least hopefully not. I guess my own, because tattooing isn't mine. It's not on paper or whatever. I'm doing it for a person. They're the one that has to look at it forever. Odds are I probably might not ever see him again. So, I try and limit my own expression to paper.
I like the idea of problem solving as an expression of creativity. Yeah.
Hey, sort of related question. Chad, you said you were very fortunate to have clients with really good ideas. I'm wondering if you've ever had some clients with extremely strange ideas, or Kenji, if you ever had to paint a sign that was really strange or memorable in any way.
I've definitely had some strange ones, but I enjoy that a lot. Stranger the better. It is a challenge then to come up with something that's going to be nice and hopefully somewhat tasteful. Every once in a blue moon, there's something where you just, it's beyond your scope, so you just say, hey, maybe I'm not the right guy for you,
Yeah, I do have the similar experience, but I guess I just when I meet that kind of client, I just need to spend more time understanding the clients, and sometimes I have to give up, or a client has to give up.
All right, we're going to take one more from each side.
Okay, hi, this question is for Kenji, and I hope it's relevant. I just looked you up and looked some of your work up, and I saw some of your artwork that had to do with the homeless population and the signs that you had made for that. Is that relevant, and is that you? Is that the work that you had done?
Yeah, that was one of the projects I did.
Oh, cool.
I actually stopped doing it because of all sorts of pressure, and it was a little difficult, touchy subject.
Yeah, I was just wondering where you got the idea from and whether or not you had other ideas or if you were even interested in using your art as sign making and trying to, I guess, bring more awareness to certain political or social issues like that.
So to be clear, that was like, it was like the sign itself for this homeless sign project was, the sign was not really important to be honest. That was actually to give a homeless person a place to like speak up. So I think I got lots of people. I got lots of negative response and also positive response. But one thing I always had to be clear about was they don't have not everyone listen to like homeless people, and people tend to like, even myself stereotype the homeless people, like categorize, basically like stereotype them. So by bringing up the like each like all different type of homeless boys, everyone has different like reason for being homeless. So I kind of wanted to bring up some like small boys for the mass audience. That way, that would like give anyone who read the blog an opportunity to think about what, like why the homeless, we cannot solve the problem of like homelessness. It's not, I guess it's not because it's more like the society, like the system is creating the homeless people, like a homeless population. It's like hard. It was like a very difficult. Like the more I get into, I learned a lot, and then that actually kind of like made me stop.
I think the signs are beautiful.
Actually, like I kind of hate like what I did. Like, I mean, like I didn't hate what I did, but I hated the signs I made. Like, I mean, like I don't like what I like even like the sign I made last month. I cannot say this too much. I cannot speak out loud about this too much because the client might hate that. He might hate to hear that. But I always regret what I did, and I'm trying to get better.
I can relate.
All right, we're going to take one last question back here, but then I encourage you to ask further questions of Chad and Kenji and Sarah down on the stage afterwards, if you'd like.
I have a question for Chad. So being an artist and also a tattooist, do you prefer the client just give you an idea and let you take care of the work? Or do you think it's, okay for the client just give you the artwork and tell you, hey, put on my body?
I mean, I'm kind of good with either one. I guess if I were to have my choice, I like the idea of the client giving me an idea and some freedom to run with it, just because then it allows me to kind of figure out something new for myself, Hopefully, most of the time I probably just go down a road that everyone else has gone down, but I don't know. I mean, in the end, it's for them, it's not for me, so I do the best I can for them.
Great. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to Sarah and Kenji and Chad.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.